You know, there's been a big issue about, you know, the manner in which voters were identified, and in some areas where, you know, that was not successful for many voters. And particularly, you take a look at areas like Kakamega. I think there was also Makueni, where we then allowed the issue of, you know, the manual voter registers that were later sent, you know, to these areas. Just from your perspective, in terms of, you know, there have been court cases that some of them, you know, the Court of Appeal delivering a ruling on the eve of the election. How does an entity like the IEBC navigate all of these laws, some of which change days before, a day before? You know, how do they make sure they stick within the law, considering 2017? You
know, if you look at the litigation, 2017 actually, in my view, still stands as the most litigated elections. While there were litigation in this one I think was slightly less. And it all boils down again to our trust levels as a country. People keep cracking the joke that in some countries, the decision maker in elections is IEBC. If you go to India, for example, once election starts, you can't even go to court until IEBC finishes. For us, the final decision maker is the court. But back to the register. The challenges around the register starts from 2007. In 2007, the Kriegler Commission report confirmed that dead voters voted. We had a register that you could not verify. You couldn't determine how many were the registered number of voters vis-a-vis those who voted. So as a consequence, we moved away from a manual register to an electronic register, because when we adopted the KIEMS kit, the BVR for registration, we made the point that electronic equals integrity. That's the decision we made. In 2017, as part of the question about enhancing the integrity, after the process of verification and inspection of the register, the process of audit, NASA then went to court around, if you remember, around the question of complementarity. I think Section 44 of the Elections Act. And there was a huge debate about the change. And to make the point that the primary method for identifying voters must be electronic, not manual, because the challenge that if you do a manual one, you are opening up for possibilities of people stuffing ballot paper. People will know if the maximum number is 700, then by 2 o'clock you will look and say, oh, in this polling station, how many have not come? 300 of them. Who are they? Then you start the process of looking for them and voting for them. So that's what was supposed to be removed, so that you don't know who has not come in terms of voting. That's the concern. Then, in this election, IEBC then says, you know, we will not have, initially they said we will not have the manual register, because they said that even the complementary mechanism will be another KIEMS kit, that we will have a KIEMS kit, but...
they said they would have, what, 6?
6 per ward. And one coalition then said, no, we must have a complementary manual one. There was a back and forth between IEBC and the parties. They then agreed that, no, we will have the register, but as a final backup when the kits fail. Then, before then, some civil society organization had gone to court. When they went to court, the judgment, I think, was just given a week ago. And the court said, no, we actually require to have a physical one, not just as a final backup, but for you to be able to cancel the issue. IEBC then said, we will go with it. They weren't happy about it. They'll go with it. They then went to the Court of Appeal. No, not them.
Not them,
UDA went to the Court of Appeal, but they were also parties to it. And the Court of Appeal people went to the Court of Appeal a day before elections. The Court of Appeal gave a decision and said, by the way, in 2017, we had said as follows. The trouble for me is that this decision, the two decisions, but the High Court and this other one, this contestation happened too late. So by the time the decision was being made, remember, the people who are in charge of elections primarily are clerks and presiding officers. Both these categories are temporary staff. You and I. They get hired, they get trained a week to elections. So they had been trained. They're actually now being deployed.
Now you retrain them?
So, like no, you don't retrain them. You couldn't. You just now pass that information that, by the way, now the courts have said our original position, the one we wanted, which is don't use this, is what will happen. The practical consequence of that, what two things, Yvonne? One is that information was not applied consistently. You had places from what I have since heard, where the register actually existed and people were cancelling names. You had places where when you were not found on the register, on the KIEMS kit, and they tried alphanumeric and it didn't work, the presiding officer then used the manual one.
Yeah.
You had other places where they did what was originally agreed, which is, it is not Koki not being found. It is the KIEMS kit itself not working completely, like Kakamega. That's when it was be used. But you also had places where the register, the presiding officer told you, we don't even have a copy of the register in the polling station. So I think this late decision for me led to a situation where you had rules that were applied not in the same way. But there's even a more fundamental issue. The more fundamental issue that we must deal with is in our process of focusing on integrity and using technology, I think we haven't asked ourselves what happens now when we disenfranchise 1 or 2 voters. I think the intention of these processes has not been to disenfranchise people, because I know of individuals who registered, who verified a week to, and then on that day, for a fault that nobody knows, your name is not there. And the presiding officer tells you, I sympathize with you.
But what can I do?
But there's nothing I can do. And it is something I think that as Kenyans we must ask ourselves, maybe our overfixation with technology is blinding us to some of the practical realities that we must deal with. People whose fingers, for some reason, cannot be... I think practical things that we must deal with in the nature of our country, not to blame anybody, but to learn lessons and ensure we deal with it in the future is critical.